are the policies, these source policies in effect today. So as Eric had explained, so there's a policy process. So we go through the policy revision process, get that approved, and everyone is on board with the policy. Then we have to train on that policy. So that is what we are doing now, is training, rolling out training on specific changes in that policy. Once that training is received, then that policy goes active. So we do the policy, write the policy, and then train to that policy, and then make it active. I can't make a policy active if people are trained on that first. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there some way, though, that we could access, the district could access what Alicia has approved?
I mean, we can talk about how we can go about putting that out. Yeah. So, yeah.
Great questions. Did you get to ask them all?
Well, almost.
Okay. I know. So then how about we do this in terms of like rules? If you can just, every person, at least 2 questions, and that way we can get it and we can come back around. Is that all right? It sounds like this bunch is really ready. Comments too. Okay, my apologies. Thank you, Brian. You have a question? Yes, sir, Mr. Captain.
This is
Holding the mic while you ask the question.
Please state your name.
Kevin Holston. This is regarding the question 1 about what you're hearing from the communities. Prior to this, I represent LMPD 6th Division, and through some great advice, I did a ride along with the 6th Division and the 1st Division, 2 and 3 in the morning, so that I could have a sobering and honest review of what officers have available to them and how they handle, the concerns that within a shift. And then the report, check this. The field realities, there were some, the license scanning technology only supports writing citations, if I got that right, not warnings. In-car radios, District 4, they didn't really have in-car radios. And this whole thing about bias tracking, that there was a particular vendor that was being used for the analytics, but that contract had ended and they had to shift over to a former contract to support that. If I've got at least those facts right, so that raises a concern. So this is kind of a structural barriers, if that's the case. And if there's not finances supplied to that to support these officers with the tools and all that, then, that's denying the officers something, but it's also denying the community the transparency and all the tools to be applied. So the question is, is there backing for this funding and IT resources and all this so the policing can be done in a 21st century manner? Or will people reform back to what they know? Because the bias part is important. So that's kind of a setup for the discussion.
Thank you. He has.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make sure that I hit all the parts of your question. So, one, you ask about the in-car radios, right? And so you probably rode with an officer that has never in his life had an in-car radio. So he's complaining about something he's never had. We went away from in-car radios in like 2012, and everybody has a microphone. The batteries last the entire shift, so that's why we took radios out of the cars. It would be literally millions of dollars just to duplicate what we already have the capabilities of. When it comes to the contract with Sigma Squared and how that got changed. And so when we were in the budget process, we were looking at that contract, but we have a contract with a company called Peregrine. And they take a lot of our data because we have different data systems. And so they integrate a lot of that data into one portal so that we can look at all the crime and activity data in one place. And they were explaining to us that they have the capabilities within their system to now do that, which they did not have before. And so that cost is built into their contract already. So we didn't see a need to continue with a $350,000 contract if they were in the process of being able to build that dashboard out for us. And so we're still in the process of working out the specifics on their dashboard. We actually just had a meeting with them last week to clarify and make sure that all their algorithms and their math and all of that stuff is correct, so that we're getting the appropriate data, if that makes sense. And you had a,
So these barriers, there's been solutions or remedies for these barriers, and there's not a funding problem, there's not a, so you have at your disposal the things that, I saw some of this was potentially structural barriers for you to do modern policing?
yes, no, I think when it comes to technology and those things, I think we're actually pretty far ahead of a lot of agencies. So like, for instance, the data that we asked for Sigma, from Sigma Squared, and what we're doing with Peregrine to now get that data, no other agency has done that in the way that we were doing it. What we wanted was real-time data, as opposed to contracting with U of L or contracting with some academic researcher to say, all right, let's go back and look at the past 3 or 5 years of data and get this academic report. We want to know what's happening now.
Okay.
And so when it comes to things like that, we're actually on the forefront of a lot of those things. And so I think from that standpoint, we're trying to be on the forefront while at the same time being fiscally responsible.
He might want to stay up there. Congo Jaguna, or it might be for Deputy Chief. I just want to follow up on the use of force and the training. Like, I understand that, but it also, if like the level of force has changed, or like what an officer should do in a situation has changed, isn't that problematic if that's not the new policy? I think that made sense.
Right, and so what we want to make sure is that everybody is actually trained on the same policy. So it's hard to enforce a policy on Cherie, but not on Eric, because Cherie went through the training and Eric didn't. So, and when it comes to when it comes to kind of how the updates for the policy, so it's the policy that you all have seen that was made public with some adjustments that we made after the public portal. So the overall big functions of the policy are largely the same, but there are things within the policy that were changed that we will need to train on, if that makes sense.
I think so. I guess I just think, and maybe it's not an example, a good example, like, let's say the use of force should have been only an empty hand strike or something, or level, say it was a higher level, but you said no, in these situations, we've got to start at a lower level on the use of continuum. How does that work if an officer hasn't been like trained to know, like, oh, I can no longer pull my weapon in this situation, I now have to do something else? And maybe that's not a good example, because maybe that hasn't happened, but I'm just trying to show like where something around use of force could have changed, and an officer may exercise the wrong use of force because the new policy isn't in effect. Have they at least been given it to read? I guess is what I should, okay.
And so
Okay.
has the public. So,
Okay.
so have you all. The policy went out for public comment, and we did this, and we talked about it at the several community safety commissions ago about the policy being out for public comment. We received public comment. We incorporated feedback from the public, from officers, into the policy revisions. The other thing that you have to think about policy, it's not just what you're talking about is like, when can I strike? When can I use this sort of weapon or tool? There's a lot of reporting processes and streamlining what goes to a sergeant, what goes to the major, what goes to the use of force review board. And so training officers on those things, training officers on when you are involved in a critical incident or involved in an officer-involved shooting, you're going to go through a use of force statement, and here's what's expected of you in those statements, that you're going to walk through the scene with a supervisor, explain what's going on. You're going to give a public safety statement. What is expected of you in those public safety statements? What are you going to be required to and compelled to tell your supervisor versus what you're not compelled to speak about? And so that is part of that policy too. So the policy is not just what can you do in a situation, it's also all of the administrative and reporting functions that come after it. So there's several different policies. I think it goes 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, and 4. Part of that training is going to be online training. Most of it is online training for officers. So there's a video that we are developing for this training. So the officers will be required to watch this video, acknowledge that they've watched this video, received training on the administrative processes that are changed in this policy. And then once that happens, then it would go live. So the training at this point is minimal. It's not necessarily classroom training. We've done the classroom training portion of the use of force policy changes.
Then I'll ask one more and get out of the queue and then try to get back in. I'm going to switch a little bit. The behavioral health thing is number 9, as you indicated. Have you all, I know some information has been given. Has there been an agreement to move that, to officially move that up the chain, and has that written? And is that going to happen?
Yes, that has. In all actuality and fairness to LMG and LMPD, we were discussing it, and I know we were in the throes of other processes and work. So we've now received in hand the minutes from meetings, content that has happened, and we've worked out the ability to now come in person and observe the next BHCOC. So that is already happening, yes. Any other, all right.
Matt Anderson. Throughout this is more of a comment than a question. I just want to emphasize considerations for juveniles, as being honest and transparent, not having read every single policy that's out there, but just making sure, that is a thought as a part of this process. And then also, LMPD has been a great partner with us. We appreciate your collaboration around juveniles in our city. But I also want to offer some support in the training phase as we get into that. Our department, we do a whole lot with just de-escalation, social emotional learning, restorative language, all of these different things that we coach our teachers and administrators on and working with juveniles. And we'd be happy to partner in any way on any training with some of those and offering some of those resources if that would be helpful.
I know the youth content is one that many, we follow your news, and the youth content is one that many are keenly aware of because there's some national trends around our young people and our youth and some of the challenges with interfacing with law enforcement and public safety.
Jeff Derwin with the County Attorney's Office. I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't help myself. So we do have many lawyers who work with LMPD, so I'm not going to go into any of that part of what we do. But on the behavioral health, I mentioned this the last time I was here, but as we work through that with LMPD, I think we need to make sure we take into consideration the fact that we've just changed the law after 50 years on 202A that we've been working. Finally got a coalition together to pass something, and it goes into effect October 1st. So there are a lot more tools for criminal prosecutors and defense attorneys and family court and families who have behavioral health issues, short of involuntarily hospitalizing them, that we are very hopeful. When I say we, I'm talking about the state, the whole state of everybody who's been working on this, can avert some of the interactions from ever happening because they are getting treatment.
Jeff, can you give people who maybe don't know about the law change, since you mentioned it, just a short summary of what that actually means?
Well, it does a whole bunch of stuff, but the parts I'm most interested in and talking about here is we have there's 3 levels in Kentucky: 202A, 202B, 202C. 202C are for people who commit heinous crimes but are mentally ill. And so that's they have a trial, and then they're committed to mental health. But there are lots of people who have mental health issues that either commit lower level offenses or are simply a parent comes in and says, help me, I can't get my child to do this. And up until October 1st, basically the courts and their providers, the doctors that analyze them, had 2 choices. They could either let them go or put them into treatment for a long time. And there are people who, don't need to be involuntarily hospitalized, but they need treatment. So 202A now gives the hospitals that receive them to review the ability to put conditions to ask the court, hey, I don't think they need to be held forever, but they need to come back and get their shot, or they need to come back or they need to see their medical provider and not go to this location. All things that now could be converted to a court order and reviewed, and we're not given just those two choices. And so there is anyone who works in this field knows there's a revolving door of people that are mentally ill in the same place, doing the same thing. And there's nothing, and no one would argue they should be put in jail forever, and jail's the last place they should be anyway. But we just didn't have any other tools. So we're hopeful we can get some of them. And the General Assembly, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Public Defender's Office was involved. Everybody. We came together, and we're hopeful that there will be some situations that the police encounter today that simply won't exist in the future because they've had this mid-level. And if someone doesn't do what the courts ordered them, that doesn't mean they're not convicted of anything. So we're not going to be able to just say up here. But now it's we've sort of proven that they have an issue that could help with a hospitalization. Now they have to rebut it, the presumption. So, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but I do think that will help.
And if I can chime in on that, what that looks like from an operational standpoint for LMPD or LMG, if you think about the HART program or our public space team that deals with that high user population on a regular basis, what it gives is the opportunity for, if we are giving you outreach and we are offering programs and it's not working, and it does become a situation where the criminal justice system has to become involved. Now that is another layer that once they're involved in the court system, that they have options to steer people towards the appropriate route as opposed to just towards jail.
Hi, Madison Mobus from Division 3. Regarding something that was said in the report that kind of conflicts with what I've been hearing in the community from contacts I've discussed it with and discussed the commission with since I've joined. The issues with Alifa being prevented from speaking to the commission or from the remote observations not being an option for several meetings that they requested, the delay in documentation being sent as requested, that to the community members, the feedback I was given seems like a lack of transparency from LMG and LMPD towards Alifa and towards the community as a whole in this process. So is that something that can be emphasized moving forward as an effort collectively from the different entities involved? Just to give more confidence to the community that this is something that LMPD, LMG, and Alifa are really working on, because the community is hearing or in seeing the Alifa, this independent monitor that's been brought in, has been shut out essentially. They don't know the nuances and the logistics of why or perhaps how that's happened, but essentially has been shut out of certain meetings that they've requested or has been kind of stalled in getting documents they've requested. And that seems problematic from people who aren't involved or in the know in those circles.
Let me give this a little context, and I welcome any one of our partners to jump in and add anything that they would so choose in light, or my additional colleagues here. So I would not call it shut out contextually. So let me just use an example. Because there are different governance and rules here in the state of Louisville that may not exist in other places. So some of this working together and learning each other is, can I access a meeting that you don't have a virtual opportunity to? For instance, we've shared that we've observed the Performance Review Board. We had to fly in to do that. But we had to work out the questions is it allowed? Does it, our attendance abrase any of your laws around open meetings as such? So we want to kind of give that give that a bit more context, and I welcome Eric to add.
There's a saying in this business that you can't monitor what you can't measure. And so for us, we want to use as many different methods to measure and observe and evaluate what's going on, because there's a lot going on. And I think the tricky part has been through, as we said, with the monitoring protocols and the ability for us to get out and understand schedules and know when things are happening. I think a lot of that communication and coordination is what we're talking about. And it's first year growing pains. Like this is, so I was part of the consent decree in New Orleans, Baltimore. I'm a monitor in Minneapolis. This is not uncommon, but we wanted to put it front and center for folks' awareness. It's our method of saying, look, this is something from which, if we're going to be able to stay on the path of implementation and stay on a schedule that is, ambitious but possible, we need to make sure everybody realizes that as many opportunities as we can be given to observe, and there's coordination. Right now, you're all writing up your availabilities for the CSC meetings. We want to come to those if we can. We're not always able to because of schedules, but for us, we haven't programmed out next year's availability yet for our quarterly public meetings. But if the CSC has figured their stuff out, and we can figure our stuff out, and if the Performance Review Board and the Incident Review Subcommittee and the BHCOC and there's a group called the SARAB, the Sexual Assault Board, if all of those functions can start to happen during the same week, and we could be on the ground and knock them all out at the same time, those are the kinds of logistics we're still working out. But we point those things out because better to talk about them early, set the narrative, make sure folks realize that it's not all perfect. But for us, I think we've seen and we've talked through that, and we've got a commitment from the department, from the Metro government to make that work better and be more transparent about the schedules, and so that we can line up our resources. And we have a team of folks. It's not just the three of us, right? So we do have some folks who can make it, some folks who could otherwise not. We want to make that work logistically. But it's a fair characterization. We want to make sure that we're telling what our observations were for the period. And so what the response has been, though, is, yep, we need to fix that. We acknowledge that. That was our bad. We're gonna do this better. So that's been the back and forth of this. So there's a way of documenting what we saw during the period, and I think the post of that has been positive. And again, I would encourage the police or Metro partners to say a word on that if they'd like.
Right, and I think to Eric and Cherie's point, there has been a lot of effort to work out. Some of it is logistics, some of it is not understanding what is being asked of us, or not articulating very well back to them what our hangups or the things that we need to work out are. So I think we worked out the PRB, and I think Eric and someone else had the opportunity to come, and so working out the schedules so that works out better for them, and making sure they have the dates ahead of time and things like that. We're working to do a better job on that. When it comes to the Behavioral Health Committee and the Incident Subcommittee, our reasoning for that is because you're talking about personally identifying information with people's mental health status and health status. And so we felt, in conjunction with legal, that it's inappropriate to do that virtually. And so as we welcome them to come, and so that's something that we need to work out, is the logistics of making sure that they're able to come when we have those meetings. But we felt it was inappropriate to do that virtually because of the nature of those specific issues.
And I can add that for the BHCOC meeting, we have been given the invitation, and we will have one of our colleagues attend that meeting. So some of this, as you can imagine, when you're in a relationship, you're saying, this is what happened, to Eric's point. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're clear on, that as we're writing for the second semi-annual, that we'll answer any of those questions, that it's nothing left as a cliffhanger, if you will. So if there's a question that's raised about where you are, or how did you resolve this, where did this land, that this follows up. And I'm going to pass the mic to Brian.
I also want to say I appreciate the question. I appreciate thorough reading of the report that people are doing. And I think one thing to say in a positive way is part of what you're seeing here today is a result of the things that we observed and the survey that the commission did about wanting to have more face time with Alifa. And when you think about it, we are here, we've got maybe 60, 90 minutes with you a few times a year. And it's not just us. I mean, clearly, questions for LMPD are really important. So I say all that to, one, say that we are working to address it from multiple directions, but also understand that as this commission, you can ask for what you need. And that's partly what you need as individuals to do your work, and partly what the broader Louisville community needs. So don't feel that you can't raise things and say, this is what we need to be effective. We need these kinds of communications. We need this kind of FaceTime. We want to have other formats. We need to have other kinds of meetings. One of the things we've committed to do is be available for kind of virtual coffee hours, so people can have other kinds of interactions with us and ask us questions and relate. So my big takeaway is that you have a really, really important role under the community commitment. And you have people on the staff in Louisville Metro who are dedicated to supporting that, but you have to be the ones to say what you need. And you have to be the ones to ask, and then we can help meet that need. So again, so I appreciate the questions.
Any more questions? Ms. Jones. I was saying to Brian, he took my thunder about what's to come.
It's just that we're on the team, we think alike.
Joni Jenkins, Home Rule City Rep. Mine is for Alifa, asking kind of to look into a crystal ball a little bit. As I move in this community and talk to people, I think there is a strong belief that there's a cultural problem within LMPD. And certainly headlines have not been favorable over the last few years. Full disclosure, I used to be a trainer for local government, so I trained employees. I like to think I was pretty good, but I don't think I changed many hearts and minds all that much. In your experience in other cities, how has training led to a change in culture, or is that even possible?
That's a really good question, Ms. Joni. I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague. He's going to answer that.
So I think the answer is it's absolutely critical. In fact, it's a cornerstone foundational piece of the puzzle. It's one piece of the puzzle. So when we talk about culture change in police departments specifically, and really in any organization, policy, training, and then holding folks accountable to the policy and the training. All three must exist, because in order to hold people accountable, you need to have something in writing about what is the expected performance and behavior. In order to reasonably expect them to follow that, you have to train them. And then there is the accountability for all of it, right? So all three must exist for it to be effective in moving the organization from where it was to where it needs to go. So yeah, I think your focus on training is the right question, but as one of a three-part puzzle that this community commitment is designed to address. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, because accountability comes in multiple forms, right? When we think about accountability, we're thinking about misconduct. That's one part of accountability, but it's data analysis to get a sense for where patterns and trends are. It's things like the Performance Review Board, where we're gonna take a critical look at every stage of this event. Just to take the Performance Review Board as an example, it's not, and for lack of a better description, it's not just whether or not the use of force was within policy. That's not the discussion that happens at a Performance Review Board. It's, did we arrive on the scene okay? Did we have all the information we need? What about the 911 side of it? What about when we got there, was a supervisor informed of the scene? Did the supervisor get there on time? When they approached the scene, are they exercising de-escalation the right way to perhaps do all they could do to exhaust their options before having to use force? Did they use procedural justice in interactions? Like all the things that can be asked of the interaction that go beyond just whether or not the force was authorized, right? And when the department takes a critical look at that, it's looking at everything. It's looking at technology. It's looking at your policies. Well, you've got a gap here, and maybe we need to address it. That's something that not a lot of departments do. They're committed to doing it. They started doing it years ago. And so what makes us look at accountability, it's understanding the behavior and how behavior influences culture, but that is founded in policies, training, and then the accountability measures that go around it. So it's all of it, and that's why this commitment is such an important thing to look at all those pieces. Because you could give policy and training all day. If there's not an accountability arm, and there is one in this, then there's gonna not be the culture moving in the direction where you think it should be going.
Everybody, it is almost 2:30. Miss, do we have time? Yeah. I'm so sorry. We've got to pick dates for the next meeting. Is it, Senator, is it a relatively quick one? Go. Okay. Oh, no, go. Just, everybody's going to wait for the Senate.
I will just say this. I know we're running out of time. First, I want to thank you all for your work on it. I want to thank the mayor's office and you all for your work, and also LMPD and the members of the commission. This is very difficult and hard. I get it, I understand it. And I will say this, I have a written, my report, my printed report, and I thought I had it in my binder. And so all of my questions is written on that. And so I will say that, so I will end up submitting something written, because I have a lot to ask. But one of the biggest things that I will ask, and I think that you got to this, is that I believe that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, if we will, of things that can be done immediately. And like one of the questions I have is, what are like the 2 or 3 things that LMPD and the mayor's office are committed to doing based on that report? For instance, like the, whether it is doing a citation or someone getting a formal thing. That sounded like a technology issue. I think in the report, one of the things talked about not having a full-time policy person. Does that policy person have to be a sworn officer? Can that be a civilian staff? Like, so I have questions like that. It's like, you know, there's a lot in the report, but I felt like there was also a lot of things that was like, well, we don't have this because we don't have this. But really the policy, how can we just hire a policy person that does not have to be, if they don't have to be LMPD? I feel like that's something that is worth finding money in the budget to say we're gonna hire somebody, a policy person, to work specifically on this until this thing is done.
So just for clarification, I think what they were talking about, and they can speak for themselves, is that we need additional capacity. We have a research and development unit that has 3 full-time civilians, that's what they do, as well as a major and an assistant chief that assists them. And so we do have people that focus on policy. I think they were saying, and I won't disagree, is that additional capacity would be greatly beneficial.
Yeah, that's right. In the context of trying to hit 13 policy suites all within a year and a half. On R&D side, they may have the right to sustain these kind of things going forward, but our recommendation is to try to up-staff, whatever that looks like, so that they can stay on the schedule from which they're trying to get this thing done. So all of it is resource dependent. All of what you see in the plan is resource dependent. Having enough training capacity and understanding there are constraints around that are specific to bargaining agreements and LMPD that I don't really want to go into because I'm still learning it my own self. But part of it is, you know, the will is there, is the capacity. And both need to be concurrent for a 5-year schedule to be completed. Because a lot of what we see in other jurisdictions is the will, the capacity is hard to get, and so you see these things draw out. And that's not what we want to see. That's why we're trying to identify them right early on. And again, we're doing that in a way that's, we hope, helpful to moving the conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for your statement/question. I think it's important. At this time, we are going to vote on dates. Jordan, do you have the dates that were most convenient for our members? While we're waiting, I just want to say, Senator, I think Louisville Metro Government and LMPD have, I think, really approached reading the report with open heart, open eyes, open mind, and a lot of the low-hanging fruit, as you called it, is being addressed, or it has been addressed. And I hope the next report will reflect that. Okay. All right. Will you announce them for me? These glasses are $5 Kmart readers?
Yeah, sure, I can announce them. And we'll put them on the screen after, assuming we adopt them. But the October date that received the most votes was, or the most preferences was Monday, October 12th. The December date that received the most preferences was Tuesday, December 8th. I'll slow down, I see people writing. October 12th, December 8th. The February date that received the most preferences was Monday, February 15th. The April date that received the most preferences was Monday, April 12th. People like Mondays. The June date that received the most preferences was Monday, June 14th. And the August date that received the most preferences was Monday, August 16th. So I'll say them one more time in rapid succession in case anyone missed. Monday, October 12th. Tuesday, December 8th. Monday, February 15th. Monday, April 12th, Monday, June 14th, and Monday, August 16th.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Can I get a motion to adopt these dates? Motion. Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Our next meeting will be October 14th? The 12th? Sorry, I legitimately cannot see. The 12th, October 12th. That concludes our meeting today. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, sir.
Is there any time to address whether or not we want to have some meetings in the evening?
Yes, can we take 5 minutes to speak to Representative Jenkins' question / statement?
I know there has been some question from the community members that meeting in the middle of the day is hard for community folks who have other obligations. And would there be any appetite for this commission to meet at 5:30, 6:30, whatever, evening? Should I make a motion?
I think given the number of dates that we have put forth to approve, I think what I was thinking, and I spoke with Misty before she left, is that at our next meeting, we can talk about, now that we have the dates approved, we can talk about maybe moving on those dates, since we know those dates are people who come, moving those dates to the evening, or having some members attend a community meeting after that meeting. So and add some urgency to it, because like we discussed this today, we're here to meet with the committee. And I am making a commitment to be able to make myself available to do that. But I think just given that we don't know people's schedules and we hadn't offered the evening date, that might not be the best to do right now. Does that work? People? Okay, great. With that, our meeting is concluded. Thank you so much.
Hey y'all, I'm Attica Scott, former Kentucky State Representative, and you're joining me today on State Watch Nights.
We will continue to provide updates as we have more information.
And you're joining me today on State Watch Nights.